You know how it is, right? There are just some brands. You're kind of stuck with them. Like, even if they bump up the price a little, or maybe their stuff isn't quite as good as it used to be, you still find yourself going back. It's like there's this invisible pull keeps you connected, and that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Hmm. That irrational loyalty.
Exactly. That irrational loyalty where people are so bonded to a brand, it almost defies logic.
It's a powerful thing.
It really is. And in today's world, everything's moving so fast, so much uncertainty, figuring out how to create that kind of deep connection with customers. Well, it's more vital than ever for businesses.
It's mission critical. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore exactly how brands pull that off, how they cultivate that irrational loyalty.
And to guide us, we've got Gabor's book, Irrational Loyalty, which lays out a really interesting framework.
Yes. And of course, we're going to be weaving in all those real-world examples and strategies that you were kind enough to send our way.
Right. It's a pretty fascinating mix, too. We've got brands that have built up this incredible devotion, like almost a cult following. And then there are those that had it and lost it. Some pretty spectacular crashes and burns. So a lot to unpack.
Absolutely.
So Gabor's insights, that's our roadmap. And your examples, those are landmarks along the way.
I like that.
We're going to kick things off by looking at this idea that we relate to brands almost like we relate to people.
Fascinating stuff.
It is. And it's all about how that connection leads to those really strong emotional ties that we're talking about.
Right.
From there, we'll get into how the whole world of branding has changed, like drastically, especially with, digital communication taking over and customers now expecting so much more from brands.
Oh, absolutely. They want brands that reflect their values, that take a stand on things they care about. It's a whole new ballgame.
Totally. And it's more than just what's happening on the outside, right?
No.
We're also going to look at how a company's internal workings, their leadership, their culture, how all of that directly impacts how customers feel about them.
Couldn't agree more.
And of course, no brand is perfect. So we'll dig into what happens when brands make mistakes.
Because they all do.
They all do, but more importantly, we'll examine how they can navigate those blunders, actually use them to strengthen their relationship with their customers.
You turn a negative into a positive.
Exactly. So for you listening, we know you're busy. You want to get the core of this quickly but thoroughly.
Right.
Don't worry, we've sifted through everything, pulled out the juiciest bits, the insights that really matter.
The good stuff.
The good stuff. We want those moments where it just clicks for you, those surprising facts, and a clear understanding of how some brands build that unshakable loyalty, all without overloading you.
A big task.
It is. But hey, that's what deep dives are for, right? So let's get started with this whole brands as people concept.
All right, let's do it. Gabor makes a really compelling argument that the relationship between a brand and a customer, it's not just a simple transaction, It's often a lot like a human relationship with all the stages and complexities.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Think about it. There's that initial attraction, right? Like you see a brand, something catches your eye.
Okay, yeah.
Then there's a kind of courtship phase where you're checking them out, learning more about them, seeing if they're a good fit. And if it clicks, you move into a deeper engagement, a sense of commitment even.
So it's like dating.
In a way, yeah. And just like with any strong relationship, whether it's with a person or a brand, shared values are crucial. Like that's the foundation. Gabor really emphasizes this.
That makes sense. If you don't have that common ground, it's probably not going to last.
Exactly. Those really strong brand-customer bonds, the ones we're talking about, they're built on that bedrock of shared values and beliefs.
Like a sense of trust and knowing that you're on the same page about important things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what creates that powerful emotional connection.
And what's really interesting is that this emotional connection can actually make the relationship more resilient. Like if the bond is truly strong, whether it's with a person or a brand, it's got a better chance of surviving when things go wrong.
Oh, for sure. Because we all make mistakes, right? Brands included.
Right.
But if there's that deep connection, that reservoir of goodwill, it can help smooth things over.
You're more willing to forgive, maybe give them a second chance.
Absolutely.
Gabor uses this great analogy, comparing a brand to a magnet.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah. Just as a magnet attracts specific types of metal, a brand naturally attracts customers who share its core beliefs and values. It's not random.
It's targeted.
It is. And that's why it's so important for brands to be really clear about what they stand for, who their ideal customer is.
Couldn't agree more. You can't be everything to everyone.
Right. Like think about Duluth Trading Company. They know exactly who their customer is.
Oh, yeah.
And their marketing, their products, everything is laser focused on that demographic. And what we saw in the research is that their customers are fiercely loyal.
They are.
And it's because of that strong alignment, that sense of belonging.
It's tribal, almost.
It is. And it's not just about values. This predictability and consistency also plays a huge role. Gabor points out that the brands we become truly loyal to, they're kind of like the people we value most in our lives.
Okay, yeah.
We have a strong sense of what they stand for, we can anticipate how they'll act, and that predictability builds trust.
We feel like we know them.
We do, and that's how a brand goes from being just a product or service to something way more meaningful.
It becomes a part of our lives.
It does, and that's when it starts to feel indispensable because we know we can rely on it consistently.
It delivers on its promise time and time again.
And it goes even deeper than that, right? Because it's not just about the practical benefits a brand offers. Gabor talks about these self-expressive benefits, how the truly great brands, they actually elevate our self-perception.
They make us feel good about ourselves.
Exactly. When we use them, it reinforces our self-concept, how we see ourselves in the world. Like it makes a statement about who we are.
Like, I'm the kind of person who uses this brand.
Exactly. And she even suggests that the best brands actually contribute to this feeling that customers have a real sense of control and satisfaction in their life. Like they're empowered, they're achieving their goals.
They're the hero of their own story.
Yes. And all of this leads to what Gabor calls the 3 brand questions. These are like the keys to unlocking the emotional dynamics between a brand and its customers. So question number 1, what does it say about a person that they use this brand?
And she really emphasizes that word use, not just buy.
Right. It's about what the brand communicates about our identity, our values. Not just to others, but to ourselves, too. It's about how we define ourselves.
It's about belonging to a tribe.
Exactly. Question number 2 gets into the nitty-gritty of what makes a brand unique. What is the singular thing customers get from this brand that they cannot get anywhere else?
Their unique selling proposition.
Yes. And it's got to be more than just a superficial difference. It has to be something meaningful that genuinely resonates with those customers.
That has to solve a real problem or meet a deep-seated need.
Absolutely. And then the third question, and I think this is the most powerful one, is how does the brand make the customer feel profoundly satisfied and validated in their own life?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It really gets to the heart of it, right? It's about how the brand empowers the customer, helps them achieve their goals, and ultimately leads to that deep sense of fulfillment and self-actualization.
It's about tapping into those core human desires and motivations.
It is. And Gabor makes a really important point here. She says that brands can't afford to become complacent. They have to constantly evolve, engage in a real dialogue with their customers, understand their changing needs and values.
Or they risk becoming irrelevant.
Exactly. In this fast-paced world, brands that don't keep up, they get left behind.
And this is why those old school approaches to marketing just don't cut it anymore. Gabor critiques those classic 4Ps product: pricing, placement, promotion. She argues that they're too focused on the transaction, on just pushing the product.
It's all about logic and reason, not emotion.
Exactly. And in today's world where we're bombarded with choices, think about that example she gives, 27 different types of bread. Our decisions are way more emotional than we realize.
It's about that gut feeling, that trust we've built with the brand. Like, I might reach for Wonder Bread not because it's the best bread, but because it's familiar. It's what I grew up with.
That nostalgia factor is huge.
It is. And it's not just about everyday stuff. Even with something aspirational, like, let's say, Valentino shoes.
Oh, yeah. Those are definitely not just about protecting your feet.
No, there's a huge emotional component to that purchase. It's about style, status, success. It's about how those shoes make you feel.
Projecting an image.
Exactly. So that emotional layer, it really underpins so much of our relationship with brands, whether we're aware of it or not.
Totally. And now, let's shift gears a bit. We're going to look at how the whole branding landscape has transformed, undergone a major makeover.
Yeah, it's a different world.
It is. And Gabor draws this really interesting parallel between this shift and what we've seen in the political arena, especially with the rise of Donald Trump.
That's right. She analyzes his campaigns almost like a masterclass in branding.
Exactly. And she points to these key elements that he used to really connect with his target audience.
Yeah.
Like, remember how he positioned himself as the uncandidate, the outsider.
Oh, yeah, he was the anti-establishment guy,
Exactly. And that really appealed to voters who felt disenfranchised, like the system wasn't working for them.
and his whole drain the swamp thing that tapped into this deep distrust of the political
And
establishment.
that resonated with a lot of people, for sure.
Absolutely. And then you had the nostalgia play, right? Make America Great Again. That harkened back to this idealized past.
Powerful stuff. And perhaps the most crucial element was his willingness to say what a lot of people were thinking, but felt like they couldn't say out loud.
He was the voice of the unheard, at least for a certain segment of the population.
Precisely. And this created a very stark contrast with Hillary Clinton. Despite her experience, a lot of people saw her as more conventional, more the same.
She lacked that clear, emotionally resonant brand identity. That hook that really grabs you.
Right. And the big takeaway here, whether it's politics or corporate branding, is that it's not enough to just push product features and benefits anymore. It's about connecting with people on an emotional level. It's about building a brand that they feel something for.
It's about storytelling.
Exactly. And this shift has also led to a situation where brands are increasingly taking public stances on these potentially divisive political and social issues.
Oh, yeah. Like, think about the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. And after that, you had all these CEOs resigning from Trump's advisory councils.
Right. Brands were forced to take a side to show where they stood.
Because customers were demanding it.
Exactly. And it's not just about making a statement. Customers now expect brands to actually walk the walk.
To align their actions with their words.
Absolutely. We saw this with how brands responded to the Parkland school shooting. Companies like Bank of America, Citigroup, Dick's Sporting Goods, they all took specific actions on gun control.
Because they knew their customers cared about it.
Exactly. And then there's the Nike Colin Kaepernick situation, which Gabor calls a gangster genius brand move.
That was a bold one.
It was. By taking a stance on such a controversial issue, they definitely alienated some customers.
Oh, for sure.
But it resonated deeply with their core target audience. It strengthened their loyalty, their sense of belonging.
It's like they were saying, we stand with you.
Exactly. And it highlights the difference between brand identity, what the brand wants to be, and brand image, how customers actually perceive the brand.
Which is ultimately what matters, right?
Absolutely. And in the digital age, where information spreads so fast, managing that brand image is more crucial than ever.
It's all about controlling the narrative.
It is. And the digital revolution has changed everything. It's no longer about broadcasting a static message. It's this constant two-way conversation with your customers.
It's about engagement, building relationships.
Exactly. And different generations have different expectations. Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, they all have their own values and priorities.
And Gen Z especially, they're very cause-oriented.
They are. They want brands that are authentic, ethical, and stand for something they believe in.
Okay, so we've talked about the external factors, but let's dig into the internal stuff. Gabor argues that a company's leadership and culture are absolutely fundamental to building brand loyalty. Like, that's the foundation.
It all starts from within.
It does. Think about those founder-led startups. The founder's personality, their values, that often sets the tone for the entire company.
It becomes the DNA of the brand.
It does. Like, take Uber under Travis Kalanick. All those allegations of a toxic bro culture, that ultimately led to a ton of problems.
And a lot of damage to the brand.
For sure. And the CEO especially, they're often seen as the embodiment of the brand. When their actions or words contradict the brand's message, it can be devastating.
It breaks the trust.
Totally. Like, Gabor points to examples like John Schnatter at Papa John's, Les Moonves at CBS, Matt Lauer at NBC, Mario Batali.
Yeah, big names.
Huge names. And their behavior, it really tarnished the brands they represented.
And it underscores the fact that building a strong brand, it's not a one-person job.
It's a team effort.
It is.
Yeah.
Everyone in the company plays a role. And making one person the face of the brand, that could be really risky.
Like the Jared Fogle situation with Subway.
Exactly. When that person falls from grace, the whole brand takes a hit.
And that's why CEOs, they have to lead by example. The corporate culture, those shared values and behaviors, it has to be aligned with the brand's promises.
Otherwise, it's just a facade.
It is. And that's what happened with United Airlines. Remember the incident where Dr. Dow was dragged off the plane?
Oh.
That was a total PR disaster. And it stemmed from a disconnect between their message of being a caring airline and their actual internal culture.
Their actions didn't match their words.
Exactly. And their initial response, it was so bad. That brief statement, almost dismissive, And then the CEO's internal letter blaming the passenger, it just made things worse.
They totally mishandled
It
him.
did. A sincere, immediate apology, that's what they should have done.
Taking responsibility.
Absolutely. And then it came out that their bonus program actually incentivized employees to cut costs, even if it meant sacrificing customer service.
It was a recipe for disaster.
It is. It
Yeah.
just reinforced the idea that their culture was broken.
And then you have the Wells Fargo scandal, where employees were creating fake accounts to meet these crazy sales targets.
Yeah.
And their reestablished ad campaign, remember that one?
Yeah.
Instead of addressing the issue head on, they focused on this historical stagecoach imagery.
Trying to evoke a sense of trust and tradition.
Exactly. But it just came across as tone deaf.
People saw right through it.
They did. And Gabor also points out that a toxic corporate culture, it often shows up in things like gender discrimination and sexual harassment.
Yeah. Those are huge red flags.
They are. Like, think about the allegations against Nike that came out in the New York Times.
Right.
Despite their strong brand, that kind of negative publicity can really hurt.
It erodes trust.
It does. And then there's Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Mark Zuckerberg's initial response, it was seen as very detached, almost apathetic.
Not a good look.
Not at all. And it cost them a lot, both financially and reputationally.
It's a reminder that what happens inside a company, it always affects the outside.
Always.
Now, let's be real. No brand is perfect.
No one is.
At some point, every business is going to make a mistake.
Inevitable.
Gabor calls this stepping in it. And she gives some pretty epic examples of brands that totally missed the mark.
Like facepalm moments.
Oh, totally. Like the Pepsi Black Lives Matter commercial,
Oh, man.
trying to leverage a serious social movement to sell soda.
Huge miscalculation.
It was. People were outraged, and rightfully so. Pepsi had to apologize, and quickly.
And then there was that startup, Bodega. They wanted to replace corner stores with these automated kiosks.
Oh, yeah.
Again, totally tone deaf. They completely missed the emotional connection people have with their local stores.
Especially in neighborhoods where those stores are like the heart of the community.
Exactly. And Victoria's Secret, they've had their share of controversies too.
For sure.
Their campaigns, they often projected this very narrow, unattainable image of beauty.
Like supermodel thin, perfectly airbrushed.
Right. And that alienated a lot of women who felt excluded, like they didn't measure up.
It created a backlash.
It did. And then there's Jack in the Box and their Bowls campaign. Remember that one? All that sexual innuendo, especially in the #MeToo era, it was just not a good look.
Yeah, they really misjudged the cultural climate.
They did. And instead of owning up to it, they got defensive, which made things worse.
So the takeaway here is that mistakes happen, but it's how you respond that really matters.
Absolutely. Gabor contrasts these mishandled situations with examples of brands that navigated crises effectively, like they really turned things around.
Like Starbucks when those two black men were arrested in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
The CEO, Kevin Johnson, his response was textbook.
He owned it.
He did. Immediate and sincere apology, full accountability. And then he took action, closed all the stores for unconscious bias training.
Wow.
Yeah, that showed real commitment to addressing the issue.
A masterclass in crisis management.
It was. And it contrasts sharply with how United and Wells Fargo handled their crises.
Night and day.
So what can we learn from this? When something goes wrong, own it. Apologize sincerely. Acknowledge the impact on those who were harmed.
Show empathy.
Exactly. And then take concrete steps to fix it.
Actions speak louder than words.
They do. Now, there are also cases where brands made controversial moves, but they were strategic about it, like WeatherTech. They ran a Super Bowl ad supporting Trump's policies.
Oh, yeah. That was a bold move.
It was. But it resonated with their target audience, people in the heartland. And sometimes you have to be willing to alienate some people to connect with others.
It's about knowing your audience.
It is. And MGM, after the mass shooting in Las Vegas, they quickly pivoted from their Welcome to the Show campaign to a message of community support.
Together we shine.
Yes. That was a sensitive and appropriate response to a tragedy.
It showed they were listening, that they cared.
And Dick's Sporting Goods, after Parkland, they decided to limit gun sales and raise the age to buy firearms.
That was a big statement.
It was. They knew they'd anger some gun enthusiasts, but it aligned with the values of their core customer base, those suburban moms.
It was a calculated risk.
It was, and it paid off. It strengthened their bond with that key demographic.
And then there's Procter & Gamble and the Tide Pod Challenge. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Kids were eating those laundry pods.
Dangerous stuff.
It was. And there was a lot of pressure on P&G to change their packaging, make it safer.
But they stood firm.
They did. They said, our product is safe when used as intended. And they put the responsibility on parents to educate their kids.
That was a bold move.
It was. But it showed that they believed in their product and they weren't willing to compromise on safety.
And sometimes that's the right thing to do, even if it means going against public opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And finally, there's Tiki brand.
The torches.
Yeah. After the Charlottesville rally, where white supremacists were carrying tiki torches, there was this negative association with the brand.
Oh, yeah.
But they turned it around. They ran ads emphasizing their values of fun, family, and inclusivity.
They reclaimed their narrative.
Exactly. They showed that they were about bringing people together, not dividing them.
So all these examples, they bring us back to the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
How do you create that irrational loyalty that Gabor talks about?
The holy grail of branding.
It is. And she reminds us that it's about having customers who would genuinely feel a loss if your brand disappeared.
Like their lives would be diminished without it.
Exactly. And they wouldn't even consider switching to a competitor.
They're in it for the long haul.
They are. And she stresses that this deep devotion, it's built on that emotional bond we've been talking about. It's about connecting with people on a human level, not just a transactional one.
It's about building relationships, not just selling products.
And the example she gives, Bluebell ice cream, that really illustrates this.
Oh, yeah.
They had that listeria outbreak, remember?
Yeah.
Their customers were heartbroken. They weren't just upset about losing their favorite ice cream. They felt like they'd lost a part of their lives.
It was like losing a friend.
It was. And that's the power of irrational loyalty.
And she also makes a great comparison between Sephora and Macy's.
Okay.
Sephora, they've created this experience, this community.
It's more than just a store.
It is. It's a place where people can connect, learn, experiment. It's fun. It's engaging.
And Macy's, it's more transactional. You go in, you buy your stuff, you leave.
Exactly. And that difference, it translates into loyalty.
People are more likely to be loyal to a brand that they feel a connection with.
For sure. And it all comes back to those 3 magical brand questions we talked about earlier.
Right. Understanding how customers use your brand, what makes you unique, and how you make them feel.
And Gabor emphasizes the use part. It's not just about why people buy your product initially. It's about how they integrate it into their lives, how it becomes a part of their story.
And she gives the example of Venmo.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
Their growth has been largely organic, word of mouth, because they created a product that people genuinely enjoy using.
It's fun, it's social, it's easy.
And that's how you build a brand that people want to be a part of.
Absolutely. So the key takeaway here is that building a brand people truly love, it's about consistency, authenticity, and delivering on your promises.
It's about walking the walk.
It is. And it's about focusing on the long game, building those deep, meaningful connections with your customers.
Like Coca-Cola, Apple, Amazon. These brands have achieved that legendary status because they understand their customers, they elevate their self-perception, they make them feel like the hero.
And they live their values.
They do. So, to wrap things up, this deep dive into irrational loyalty has shown us that it's not about flashy marketing or gimmicks.
It's about substance.
It is. It's about building a brand that people trust, believe in, and feel connected to on a deep emotional level.
It's about forging those unbreakable bonds.
And for you listening, we hope this has given you some real insights into what drives that kind of loyalty.
Food for thought.
Definitely. So as you go about your day, think about those brands you're irrationally loyal to. What is it about them that you connect with so strongly? And how can you apply these principles in your own life, whether it's in your business or your personal relationships? It's all about building those meaningful connections that make us feel like we belong.
Powerful stuff.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.